The doctor's hands were shaking. Not while looking at the ultrasound screen where my baby's heartbeat flickered softly in black and white, but at the paperwork resting on her desk, at my husband's name. She stared at it for several long seconds before abruptly reaching forward and turning off the monitor mid-exam. The steady rhythm of my baby's heartbeat vanished, leaving only silence humming inside the room. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said quietly. Her voice didn't sound professional anymore. It sounded afraid. "I need you to come with me right now." My heart dropped. I thought something was wrong with the baby. Every terrifying possibility rushed through my mind as she helped me sit up and guided me down the hallway into her private office. Then she closed the door and locked it. The sharp click echoed louder than it should have. I gripped the edge of the chair, bracing myself for devastating medical news. Instead, she said something that made even less sense. "You need to leave your husband today," she whispered. "Before you go home, call a divorce lawyer first." I laughed in disbelief. "What? We're having a baby," I said. "We're happy. There has to be some mistake." Her expression softened with a kind of pity that made my stomach twist. "That," she said slowly, opening a folder with trembling hands, "is exactly why you're in danger." And sitting there, 4 months pregnant, I had no idea my entire marriage had already been turned into a carefully planned trap by the man sleeping beside me every night. My name is Lillian Whitmore, and until the morning my doctor locked her office door, I believed my life had finally settled into something safe. I was 31, living in Westport, Connecticut, working as a senior brand strategist for a boutique marketing firm that catered mostly to luxury clients. From the outside, my life probably looked polished, the kind people quietly envy without admitting it. But the truth was simpler than that. I liked routines. Morning walks along quiet streets lined with old maple trees. Coffee from the same cafe where the owner saved me the corner seat near the window. Evenings spent at home rather than at charity events my family name constantly invited me to. The Whitmores were what people politely called old money. My great-grandfather built a shipping company decades ago, and careful investments kept the family comfortable ever since. Wealth, in our family, was never meant to be loud. My grandmother used to say money should solve problems quietly, not create attention. When she passed away 6 years earlier, she left me her estate, a protected trust and the historic Whitmore house overlooking Long Island Sound. The property had belonged to our family for generations, filled with photographs, handwritten recipes, and memories layered into every room. I never felt like I owned it. I felt like I was taking care of it. That was the version of me my husband claimed to love. I met Adrian Hale 4 years earlier at a charity fundraiser hosted on our property. I had escaped to the bar after enduring too many polite conversations about investments and inheritance when he appeared beside me, joking about the terrible live band and asking what book I was reading instead of what I did for a living. It felt refreshing. He said he worked as a financial consultant and admitted he felt out of place among wealthy families. Looking back, that confession should have sounded strange. A financial consultant attending a high-profile charity event without researching the host family didn't make sense, but at the time I interpreted it as humility. We dated for a year. Adrian remembered everything: my favorite tea, the anniversary of my grandmother's death, how I hated driving in heavy rain. He brought dinner when I worked late and insisted on paying even when I argued. My mother, Evelyn Whitmore, distrusted him immediately. "There's something rehearsed about him," she told me after their first meeting, "like he's performing kindness." I accused her of being protective to the point of unfairness. We argued more than we ever had before. Eventually, conversations became shorter, then rare. Choosing Adrian felt like choosing independence. I didn't realize what I was giving up at the time. He proposed at sunset in the gardens behind Whitmore House. He cried during his vows at our wedding, promising loyalty, partnership, and honesty. I believed him completely. For 2 years, we tried to have a baby. Every failed month hurt more than the last. When we finally visited a fertility specialist, the diagnosis came quickly: severe male factor infertility. Natural conception was extremely unlikely. Adrian broke down in the parking lot afterward, apologizing as if he had personally disappointed me. I held him while he cried. I told him we would figure it out together. That's what marriage meant. Facing disappointment side by side. We chose IVF. Adrian insisted on researching clinics himself, saying he wanted to take responsibility for once. I was exhausted enough to be grateful. The first cycle failed. The second worked. I will never forget sitting on the bathroom floor, staring at the positive test, laughing and crying at the same time, while Adrian lifted me into his arms. He talked about baby names, about teaching our child to swim, about building traditions. For the first time in years, I felt certain about the future. A few weeks later, he gently suggested updating my will. Just practical, he said. We're a family now. I agreed without hesitation. Pregnancy softened everything at first. Adrian became attentive, protective, almost overly careful. But sometime during my 4th month, small things began to change. His phone stayed face down. Late-night calls moved outside. New passwords appeared. When I asked questions, he smiled and blamed work stress. When I pressed further, he joked about pregnancy hormones making people anxious. I apologized more often than he did. One night, I woke and found him whispering into his phone in the kitchen. "It's almost time," he said quietly. When he noticed me, he ended the call immediately. "Work," he said. "Go back to sleep." I did. Because trusting your husband feels easier than imagining your entire life might be built on something fragile. A week later, I went to a routine ultrasound appointment alone. Adrian said he couldn't miss an important client meeting. I remember lying back as cold gel touched my skin, waiting to see my baby moving across the screen. I remember smiling. And I remember the exact moment everything began to change. When the doctor opened my file, saw my husband's name, and her hands started to shake. Dr. Hannah Reeves did not turn the ultrasound monitor back on. That detail stayed with me longer than anything else. Longer than her trembling hands, longer than the locked office door, even longer than the words that followed. The screen where my baby's heartbeat had been flickering moments earlier remained dark, as if the room itself had decided something irreversible had begun. She sat across from me slowly, folding her hands together as though steadying herself. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said gently, "before I explain anything, I need you to understand that your baby appears healthy." Relief rushed through me so suddenly I almost cried. "Then what's wrong?" I asked. She hesitated, choosing each word carefully. "I recognized your husband's name." A cold sensation slid down my spine. Adrian Hale. She opened a folder taken from her desk drawer. Inside were documents already prepared, edges worn as if they had been reviewed repeatedly. "My sister works at the fertility clinic you attended," she continued. 3 weeks ago, she came to me because she couldn't live with what she knew anymore." Confusion tightened my chest. "What does that have to do with me?" Her eyes softened. "Everything." She didn't hand me the papers yet. Instead, she spoke slowly, allowing the story to unfold piece by piece. Months earlier, during my IVF treatment, a man had approached a clinic nurse privately. He claimed he needed discretion. He explained that his wife didn't know he planned to use donor sperm because of a supposed genetic issue. He offered compensation, a life-changing amount of money, for cooperation. My stomach nodded. "That happens?" I asked weakly. "It shouldn't," she replied. Her sister, overwhelmed by debt, accepted $30,000. Another payment went to a lab specialist responsible for handling samples. Together, they ensured a substitution went unnoticed. I shook my head instinctively. "No, that can't be about us." Dr. Reeves finally turned the first page toward me. There was Adrian's signature. I recognized it instantly. The same smooth curve he used on birthday cards, contracts, everything. The room felt suddenly too small. According to the records, Adrian arranged for his sperm sample to be replaced with donor sperm during our IVF cycle. The pregnancy had never been biologically his. My thoughts refused to connect. "But why would he do that?" I whispered. Her voice lowered. "Because he wasn't trying to hide infertility. He was creating evidence." The words landed slowly like falling glass. Adrian intended to wait until after the baby was born. Then he would request a DNA test. Framed as sentimental, a celebration of fatherhood. When results proved he wasn't the biological parent, clinic records would be altered to suggest our IVF attempt had failed, which meant only one explanation remained. I had cheated. My breath caught. "Our prenup," I said faintly. She nodded. The infidelity clause, financial penalties, loss of property rights, public humiliation backed by medical documentation. I stared at the pages, memories rearranging themselves with terrifying clarity. The sudden interest in updating my will, the pressure about finances, the late-night phone calls. "He cried when we found out I was pregnant," I whispered. Dr. Reeves didn't argue. "People can cry for many reasons," she said quietly. Shock didn't feel loud. It felt silent, like standing outside your own life, watching it collapse without sound. I pressed my hand against my stomach instinctively. "My baby," I murmured. "Innocent," she said softly. "Completely innocent." Tears blurred the documents, but something unexpected began replacing panic. "Focus." "He doesn't know I know," I said slowly. "No," she confirmed. The realization settled heavily between us. If Adrian believed his plan was still working, then I still had time. I wiped my face and straightened slightly. "I need copies," I said. She nodded immediately. As she gathered the papers, she added quietly, "You should be careful. Men who plan this far ahead rarely expect resistance." I understood what she meant. Driving home afterward, the envelope rested on the passenger seat like something alive. Every red light felt longer, every memory replayed differently. The house came into view just as the sun began to set. Adrian's car was already in the driveway. For a moment, fear surged, the instinct to turn around and disappear somewhere safe. Instead, I forced myself to breathe and walked inside. He stood in the kitchen, smiling warmly. "How was the appointment?" he asked. I handed him the ultrasound photo. "Perfect," I said. He pulled me into a hug, relief flooding his face. And while he held me, thanking fate for our future, I realized something chilling. The man embracing me believed he was protecting a secret. He had no idea I was already learning how to survive it. Sometimes the moment everything changes doesn't look dramatic at all. It looks like an ordinary evening, a familiar smile, and a secret only one person in the room understands. If you've ever felt that shift, you already know why some stories stay with us long after they begin. The strangest thing about discovering your marriage is built on a lie is how normal everything looks afterward. Nothing changes on the surface. The same kitchen lights glow in the evening. The same dishes sit drying beside the sink. The same person who carefully planned your destruction asks whether you want tea before bed. That first night after the appointment, Adrian behaved exactly as he always had. He made dinner, asked about my day, and rested his hand gently against my stomach while talking about the future as if it were already guaranteed. I answered naturally. I even laughed once. And somewhere between pretending and surviving, I realized something important. Panic would only help him. If Adrian sensed anything was wrong, he would adjust, destroy evidence, rewrite the story before I understood all of it myself. So I became quiet, observant, careful. Later that evening, while clearing dishes, I noticed his phone light up on the counter. A message preview flashed briefly before disappearing. "Just a little longer. Everything's almost set." My pulse jumped, but I kept rinsing the plate in my hands. "Work?" I asked casually. "Yeah," he replied immediately, not even looking up. Too fast. Too smooth. That night, he fell asleep easily beside me while I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the last 4 years. The way he insisted on choosing the fertility clinic, the conversations about money disguised as concern, the gradual distance between me and my mother. None of it felt accidental anymore. Around 2 a.m, his phone vibrated again. Adrian slipped quietly out of bed and walked toward the hallway. I counted to 10 before following. His voice carried faintly from the kitchen. "She doesn't suspect anything," he whispered. "We just need to wait." The words settled heavily in my chest. I stepped back silently and returned to bed before he could see me. When he came back, he kissed my shoulder. "Everything okay?" he murmured. "Just tired," I said. He fell asleep instantly. I didn't, because lying there in the dark, I understood that the man beside me was not improvising. He was executing something carefully planned, and for the first time, I allowed myself to think differently. If he could pretend, so could I. The next morning, after Adrian left for work, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the envelope Dr. Reeves had given me. My hands no longer shook when I opened it. Instead, I read every document slowly, forcing myself to understand details instead of reacting emotionally. Dates, transfers, signatures, intent. By noon, one decision felt unavoidable. I needed help, not from friends who would panic or confront him too soon, but from someone who understood investigations. After searching for nearly an hour, I found a name repeatedly recommended in legal forums: Marcus Delaney, a former financial crimes detective turned private investigator based outside Stamford. I called before I could change my mind. His voice was calm, direct. "I don't take domestic disputes," he said at first. "This isn't one," I replied quietly. "I think my husband is committing fraud." There was a pause. "Come in this afternoon," he said. His office was smaller than I expected. Simple desk, organized files, no unnecessary decoration. He listened without interrupting while I explained everything, sliding copies of the documents across the table. When I finished, he leaned back slightly. "Your husband made a big mistake," he said. My voice felt steady when I asked, "Which one?" He assumed you'd react emotionally instead of strategically. The words settled over me like permission. Marcus explained the process carefully. Financial tracing, surveillance patterns, confirming accomplices. Evidence had to be undeniable before any legal move happened. Until then, he added, "You act exactly the same at home." I nodded. Driving back to Whitmore House, the late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the driveway. Adrian's car wasn't there yet, giving me a few quiet minutes alone. For the first time since the doctor locked that office door, fear loosened its grip. Not because things were better, but because I finally had a plan. That evening, Adrian came home smiling, carrying flowers. "For you," he said warmly. I accepted them, thanking him, playing the role he expected perfectly. While arranging the bouquet in water, I realized something almost surreal. He believed he was guiding every step of our future. He had no idea another story had already begun, one he wasn't writing anymore. And as I stood there smiling across the kitchen counter, I understood that survival sometimes starts with a single decision: to stop being the person someone thinks you are. Once you begin looking for the truth, it becomes impossible to stop seeing it. Marcus Delaney warned me about that during our first meeting. "Patterns reveal character," he said. "Most people don't change behavior overnight. They repeat what already works for them." Within days, I understood exactly what he meant. Adrian had always seemed attentive, affectionate even, but now I noticed how precise his attention was. He watched reactions carefully, adjusting his tone depending on how I responded. If I appeared uncertain, he became reassuring. If I agreed with him, warmth followed immediately. Affection, I realized, was conditional. One evening, he came home unusually early carrying takeout from my favorite restaurant. "You deserve a break," he said, kissing my forehead. 6 months earlier, the gesture would have made me emotional. Now I quietly wondered what conversation he planned to have. We ate at the kitchen island while soft music played in the background. Halfway through dinner, he leaned casually against the counter. "I've been thinking about the future," he said. "With the baby coming, we should probably simplify things financially." There it was again. Careful, gentle, strategic. "What do you mean?" I asked lightly. "Maybe adding my name to parts of your trust," he said. "Just for emergencies. It's practical." I kept my expression thoughtful rather than resistant. "I'll think about it," I replied. A flicker of disappointment crossed his face before disappearing behind a smile. "Of course," he said quickly. "No pressure." But the pressure lingered anyway. Later that night, after he fell asleep, I wrote everything down: the exact wording, his tone, the timing. Marcus insisted documentation mattered even when conversations seemed small. "Intent builds cases," he reminded me during a follow-up call. Meanwhile, he worked quietly in the background. 3 days later, he asked to meet again. This time, he brought a tablet filled with financial charts. "I started tracing publicly accessible transactions," he explained. "Your husband's spending patterns don't match his reported income." Lines and numbers filled the screen. Transfers spread across multiple accounts, small enough individually to avoid suspicion. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means money is coming from somewhere it shouldn't." He zoomed in on several entries connected to accounts Adrian managed professionally. My stomach tightened. "Client funds," Marcus said carefully, "possibly siphoned slowly over time. Embezzlement, The word hung silently between us. Marcus continued. There's more. He's attending private gambling events on high stakes. Losses appear significant. Everything suddenly aligned. The urgency about my trust, the late-night calls, the tension beneath his calm demeanor. He's running out of options, Marcus added. People under financial pressure make bigger risks. Driving home afterward felt different from previous days. The shock had faded, replaced by clarity. I wasn't just uncovering betrayal. I was seeing desperation. That evening, Adrian greeted me with unusual enthusiasm. I was thinking, he said while pouring wine, we should celebrate before the baby comes. Invite friends, family, something joyful. The suggestion startled me. A public gathering meant visibility, witnesses, attention. I smiled slowly. That sounds nice. His relief was immediate. Perfect. Later, while he showered, his phone buzzed repeatedly on the nightstand. A name appeared briefly before the screen darkened. Unfamiliar, followed by a heart emoji. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to anymore. Marcus confirmed the next morning what I already suspected. An ongoing relationship with his assistant. Hotels booked during supposed business trips. Messages carefully timed during hours he claimed to be working late. Oddly, the discovery hurt less than expected. By then, betrayal felt like confirmation rather than surprise. That night, I walked alone through the gardens behind Whitmore House. The ocean breeze carried the scent of roses my grandmother planted decades earlier. I paused beside her favorite bench, resting both hands over my stomach. I'm going to fix this, I whispered quietly. Not out of anger, out of protection. When I returned inside, Adrian looked up from the couch and smiled warmly. There you are, he said. I was starting to miss you. I smiled back easily now, because pretending had stopped feeling unnatural. He believed he was guiding events toward a future he controlled, but every new piece of truth shifted that future further away from him. And for the first time, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't waiting for the truth anymore. I was preparing for the moment it would finally be seen. Calling my mother felt harder than confronting the truth about my husband. For 2 years, silence had lived between us. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady and heavy. We exchanged polite holiday messages, occasional birthday texts, nothing more. Every conversation ended carefully before real emotions could surface. I had chosen Adrian, and in doing so, I had slowly stepped away from the person who knew me longest. Marcus was the one who finally said it plainly. Isolation is part of manipulation, he told me during a meeting. Whether intentional or not, the result is the same. You need people who knew you before him. I stared at my phone for nearly an hour before pressing call. It rang twice. Hello? My mother's voice sounded cautious, hopeful but restrained, like someone afraid to expect too much. Mom, I said. Silence followed. Then a quiet inhale. Lillian? The way she said my name broke something open inside me. Words tangled in my throat, and suddenly I couldn't pretend calm anymore. You were right, I whispered. Another pause. Not victorious, not angry, just listening. About Adrian, I added. About everything. I expected questions, maybe frustration earned after years of warnings I ignored. Instead, she asked gently, Are you safe? Tears slipped down my face before I realized I was crying. I told her everything. The clinic, the fraud, the investigation, the debts, the affair. I spoke slowly, forcing myself not to rush, as if saying the truth aloud made it stronger. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she exhaled softly. I always hoped I was wrong, she said. I never wanted you to be hurt. Guilt tightened in my chest. I chose him over you. No, she corrected quietly. You chose love. That's never a mistake. Trusting the wrong person is. Her words settled gently instead of accusingly, and for the first time in months I felt something unfamiliar return. Relief. Then her voice shifted, calmer, sharper. The attorney she had once been emerging naturally. Listen carefully, she said. You don't confront him yet. You document everything, and you hire a lawyer immediately. I already have an investigator, I admitted. A faint note of approval entered her tone. Good. I'll connect you with someone who understands financial prenups and fraud cases. Within 48 hours, she introduced me to Caroline Vance, a divorce attorney known for dismantling complex financial schemes. Caroline reviewed Marcus's findings quietly, flipping through documents without visible reaction. When she finally looked up, her expression held calm certainty. "Your husband planned this carefully," she said. "Unfortunately for him, planning leaves trails." She explained how Adrian's affair alone violated our prenup. Combined with fraud and financial misconduct, his strategy collapsed legally. "He expected emotional chaos," she added. "What he's getting is documentation." For the first time since the ultrasound appointment, I felt steady ground beneath me again. That evening, I returned home to find Adrian cooking dinner, humming softly as if nothing in the world had changed. "You seem happier lately," he observed while setting plates down. I smiled lightly. "Maybe I'm finally relaxing." He studied me for a moment, searching for inconsistencies. Then he relaxed too. Watching him, I realized how completely he believed his version of me. Trusting, forgiving, predictable. He had never truly seen who I was. Later that night, I walked through Whitmore House alone. Moonlight stretched across polished floors, illuminating photographs of generations before me. Women who endured wars, loss, and reinvention. I stopped in front of my grandmother's portrait. "I almost disappeared," I whispered. "Not financially, emotionally." My phone buzzed softly. A message from my mother appeared. "Lunch tomorrow?" I smiled immediately. Always. For the first time in months, I no longer felt alone inside my own life. And somewhere deep down, fear was slowly transforming into something stronger. Not revenge, not anger, but certainty. Because Adrian believed he had isolated me completely. What he didn't understand was that reconnecting with the people who truly knew me changed everything. Sometimes the strongest turning point isn't discovering the truth. It's realizing you don't have to face it alone. And if stories about resilience and quiet strength speak to you, you already know why some journeys are worth following all the way through. After reconnecting with my mother, everything began moving faster. Not outwardly. Life inside Whitmore House still appeared calm and predictable. But beneath the surface, pieces were shifting into place with quiet precision. Caroline Vance coordinated closely with Marcus, reviewing every document, every timeline, every financial trail Adrian believed he had hidden well enough to survive scrutiny. What surprised me most was how methodical the process felt. There were no dramatic breakthroughs, no sudden confessions, just careful accumulation. Facts layered slowly until denial would become impossible. "Cases like this are built patiently," Caroline explained during one meeting. "Emotion makes noise. Evidence makes outcomes." Marcus had already confirmed irregular transfers from accounts Adrian managed professionally. Now forensic accountants were tracing patterns further back, uncovering small withdrawals repeated over months. Amounts subtle enough individually to avoid attention, devastating when viewed together. Each discovery removed another piece of the man I thought I knew. Adrian wasn't reckless. He was desperate, and desperation leaves fingerprints. At home, he appeared increasingly restless. He checked emails constantly, stepped outside to take calls, and woke earlier than usual, pacing quietly before work. Once, I caught him staring at spreadsheets late at night, jaw tight, unaware I was watching from the hallway. Pressure was reaching him. One evening, he came home unusually affectionate, wrapping his arms around me the moment I entered the kitchen. "I miss spending time together," he said. "Everything's been so stressful lately." The words sounded sincere enough to hurt. "I know," I replied gently. He pulled back slightly, studying my face. "You trust me, right?" The question lingered longer than expected. I smiled softly. "Of course." The lie came easier now, not because I enjoyed deception, but because survival required patience. Later that night, Marcus called. "I confirmed the gambling activity," he said. "Private games, high stakes, losses significant. He's borrowing to cover previous debts." "How much?" I asked quietly. "Close to 200,000. I closed my eyes briefly. The number explained everything. The urgency, the planning, the calculated risks. Adrian hadn't created the IVF scheme out of cruelty alone. He had been running out of time. Marcus continued. "People he owes aren't the patient type. That increases the likelihood he accelerates whatever plan he has. meaning the timeline was shortening. Caroline agreed when I spoke with her the next morning. "He's moving toward execution," she said. "We need to be ready before he acts." That afternoon, Adrian surprised me again. "I've been thinking about hosting something before the baby arrives," he said casually. "A gathering. Friends, family, something positive." I hid my reaction carefully. The suggestion aligned perfectly with what Caroline had predicted. Adrian wanted witnesses, sympathy, a public stage for whatever narrative he planned to unveil later. "That sounds nice," I said. Relief softened his shoulders instantly. He believed the idea was his. Behind the scenes, Caroline began coordinating with a prosecutor. Molly Reeves finalized her sworn statement. Additional confirmations arrived linking payments directly to accounts Adrian controlled. The net tightened quietly. One night, unable to sleep, I walked through the house alone. The ocean outside reflected moonlight across the windows, casting shifting shadows along the walls. I stopped beside the nursery we had begun preparing weeks earlier. Half-painted walls, a crib still in its box, plans interrupted by truth. I rested my hand over my stomach, feeling a faint movement beneath my palm. "You're why I'm doing this," I whispered. "Not revenge, protection." The next morning, Caroline called again. "We're close," she said. "Very close. But timing matters. He needs to feel completely secure before anything happens." I understood. Adrian had to believe he was winning. That evening, he sat beside me on the couch, smiling as he described plans for the future. Vacations, schools, family traditions. I listened quietly, watching the man who believed every step was unfolding exactly as he intended. For a brief moment, grief surfaced again, not for him, but for the illusion I once trusted completely. Then it passed, because beneath the calm surface of our home, everything had already changed. The plan Adrian spent years building was nearing completion. He simply didn't realize it no longer belonged to him. And as he spoke confidently about tomorrow, I understood something with absolute clarity. The closer he felt to success, the closer he was walking toward the end of everything he thought he controlled. The idea of turning Adrian's own plan against him didn't happen all at once. It developed slowly during conversations with Caroline and Marcus, shaped by one simple truth. Adrian's entire strategy depended on perception. He wasn't just trying to win, legally. He wanted sympathy. He wanted witnesses who would believe he was the devoted husband betrayed by an unfaithful wife. "If image is his weapon," Caroline said during one meeting, "then image becomes our evidence." That was when the idea of a public gathering stopped feeling accidental. It became necessary. A few days later, I brought it up casually over breakfast. "I was thinking," I said, stirring my coffee, "maybe we should host something before the baby comes. A small celebration, friends and family." Adrian looked up immediately, interest flashing across his face. "That's a great idea," he said. "People would love that." Of course they would. And more importantly, so would he. We discussed details lightly. Garden tents, catering, invitations. I offered to handle most of the planning so he wouldn't feel stressed. He agreed without hesitation, visibly relieved. Exactly as Caroline predicted. Over the next 2 weeks, preparations transformed Whitmore House into something bright and welcoming. White tents were arranged across the lawn overlooking the water. Strings of lights stretched between trees. Caterers walked the grounds making notes while florists delivered arrangements that filled the air with soft fragrance. To everyone else, it looked like a joyful milestone. Behind the scenes, it was something else entirely. Marcus finalized timelines linking Adrian's gambling payments to stolen client funds. Molly Reeves confirmed she would testify publicly if necessary. The prosecutor quietly prepared documents awaiting only the right moment. Every piece moved carefully into place. Adrian, meanwhile, seemed happier than he had in months. He practiced speeches in the mirror when he thought I wasn't looking, adjusted ties, tested smiles, rehearsed warmth the same way an actor prepares before stepping on stage. Watching him felt surreal. I began to wonder how long he had lived like this, performing sincerity instead of feeling it. One evening, while reviewing guest confirmations together, he leaned closer on the couch. "You know what would make the day really special?" he asked. I already knew. "What?" I said gently. "A DNA keepsake test," he replied almost shyly. "We could frame the results for the nursery, something symbolic." There it was, the final step of his plan spoken aloud with perfect timing. I forced a soft smile. "That sounds meaningful." Relief crossed his face instantly. He believed everything was unfolding exactly as he intended. Later that night, after he fell asleep, I walked outside into the garden. Workers had finished setting up most of the decorations, leaving the estate glowing softly beneath evening lights. It looked beautiful, peaceful, almost unreal compared to the truth hidden beneath it. Caroline called shortly after. "The warrant is nearly ready," she said quietly. "We're coordinating timing. Are you certain you want this to happen publicly?" I looked toward the house where Adrian moved inside, unaware. "Yes," I answered calmly, because this wasn't about humiliation. It was about certainty. No private denial, no rewritten narrative, no chance for him to claim misunderstanding. Truth needed witnesses. The night before the event, Adrian wrapped his arms around me while we stood in the kitchen. "I'm really happy," he said softly. "Everything finally feels right." For a moment, sadness flickered through me. Grief for the life I once believed we shared. "I'm glad," I said. And strangely, I meant it, because his confidence meant he suspected nothing. The next morning arrived clear and warm. Guests would arrive within hours. Music equipment was tested, tables arranged, glassware polished until it reflected sunlight. A perfect celebration, a perfect stage. Adrian adjusted his jacket, smiling with anticipation as he looked out across the lawn. He thought tomorrow would secure his future. He had no idea it would end the story he had spent years carefully writing. And as I watched him walk confidently toward the garden, I understood something with complete certainty. The truth was no longer approaching quietly. It was waiting just beyond the moment he felt safest. The morning of the celebration arrived calm and bright. The sky stretched wide and blue above Whitmore House, as if nothing in the world could possibly go wrong. From the outside, it looked like a perfect day. Guests began arriving just after noon. Cars lined the long gravel drive while soft music drifted across the gardens. White tents shimmered in the sunlight, and servers moved quietly between tables, carrying champagne and small plates of food. Laughter filled the air, exactly the atmosphere Adrian loved. He moved easily through the crowd, greeting people with practiced warmth, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. Every time someone mentioned the baby, he placed his hand gently over my stomach, smiling for photographs like the image of devoted fatherhood. Watching him felt surreal. I could almost forget everything if I didn't know the truth. My mother stood near the rose garden, speaking calmly with guests who hadn't seen her in years. Marcus blended easily among attendees, unnoticed but observant. Caroline remained near the back lawn, appearing like another family friend enjoying the afternoon. Every piece was exactly where it needed to be. Adrian thrived under attention. I watched him laugh louder, stand taller, grow more confident with every passing minute. Compliments fed his certainty. Around 3 o'clock, he made his move. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders and raised his voice just enough for nearby guests to hear. "I've been thinking," he said warmly, smiling toward the group. "We should do something special today, something meaningful for the baby." Curious murmurs spread quickly. He turned toward me, eyes shining with rehearsed emotion. "What if we do a DNA keepsake test?" he suggested. "We could frame the results for the nursery, a reminder that our family is connected forever." Soft laughter and approving comments followed. "That's adorable. So thoughtful." I lowered my gaze, pretending hesitation. "Oh, I don't know," I said quietly. "Come on," he encouraged gently. "We could even open the results here together." He was glowing now, confident, certain the moment belonged to him. I let the silence stretch just long enough. "Well," I said slowly, "if everyone thinks it's a good idea," encouraging voices answered immediately. Adrian smiled wider. Victory already lived in his expression. Instead of reaching for a testing kit, I stepped away from him and walked toward the small platform set near the fountain, originally meant for speeches. The music faded as I picked up the microphone. Conversation softened into curiosity. Adrian watched me, still smiling, though confusion flickered briefly across his face. "Thank you all for coming today," I began, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. This gathering was meant to celebrate family and honesty. The word lingered. Adrian's smile tightened. My husband suggested sharing something meaningful, I continued, and I agree. There's something everyone here deserves to know. I reached beneath the podium and lifted a folder. Across the lawn, Marcus shifted slightly. Caroline stepped closer. My mother met my eyes and gave the smallest nod. "Elena," Adrian said quietly, laughing nervously. "What are you doing?" I looked directly at him. "Helping you tell the truth." The crowd grew still. "Months ago," I said clearly, "Adrian and I underwent IVF treatment because doctors confirmed he could not biologically father a child." Murmurs spread immediately. I opened the folder. "These are original clinic records," I continued. "They show my husband paid medical staff to secretly replace his sperm sample with donor sperm, without my knowledge." Gasps broke through the silence. Adrian stepped forward quickly. "This is ridiculous," he said sharply. "She's confused." "I'm not finished." The firmness in my voice stopped him. "My husband's plan," I continued, "was to wait until our child was born, request a DNA test, and then accuse me of infidelity when the results proved he wasn't the biological father." Understanding began spreading visibly through the crowd. "He intended to claim financial penalties under our prenup," I added quietly. Adrian's breathing grew uneven. "You're making a mistake," he whispered. Behind him, 2 uniformed officers stepped calmly from the guest house, moving toward the gathering. Most guests hadn't noticed yet, but Adrian would. And within seconds, the story he believed he controlled was about to collapse in front of everyone who had ever believed him. For a few seconds after I finished speaking, the entire garden fell silent. It wasn't the polite quiet of people listening. It was the stunned stillness that follows something no one expected to witness. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Every face turned toward Adrian, waiting for him to laugh it off, to explain, to restore the version of reality everyone understood. He tried. A sharp laugh escaped him, forced and brittle. "This isn't funny," he said, shaking his head as if correcting a misunderstanding. "Lillian, you're overwhelmed. Pregnancy stress. Everyone knows emotions get intense." "I brought proof," I said calmly. I held up another document. "And witnesses." The word shifted the atmosphere instantly. Adrian's confidence faltered. His eyes moved quickly through the crowd, searching for agreement, for someone to support him. Instead, he found uncertainty and distance. I gestured toward the edge of the lawn. A young man stepped forward hesitantly. Ethan Cole, the donor Adrian had secretly hired. His voice trembled, but he spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "I was paid privately," he said. "I believed I was helping a couple who agreed to it. I didn't know it was part of fraud until investigators contacted me." Gasps rippled outward. Adrian's mother pressed a hand over her mouth. "That's not true," Adrian snapped, though his voice lacked conviction now. Before he could recover, another figure stepped forward. Molly Reeves. She looked pale but determined. "I'm the nurse who accepted payment," she said. "I've already provided a sworn statement." The air seemed to leave Adrian's lungs all at once. He turned toward me, anger replacing charm. "What are you doing?" he hissed quietly. "You're destroying everything." I met his gaze steadily. "You already did." I opened the folder again, revealing photographs Marcus had gathered. Hotel entrances, dinners, unmistakable moments shared with another woman. "In addition," I said, my voice even, "Adrian has been involved in an affair with his assistant for 8 months. A shocked murmur moved through the guests. His father stared at the ground. His mother began crying softly. And financial investigators have confirmed he embezzled funds from client accounts to cover gambling debts, exceeding $180,000. That was the moment disbelief vanished. Reality settled heavily across the lawn. Adrian stepped backward, shaking his head. "No," he said quietly. "This isn't happening." 2 police officers approached calmly through the parted crowd. "Adrian Hale," one officer said, voice clear and professional. "You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement." The click of handcuffs sounded louder than anything else that afternoon. Adrian stared down at his wrists as if they belonged to someone else. "This is a mistake," he said, turning toward me again. "Lillian, tell them, fix this." For the first time since the beginning of all this, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not performance, not manipulation, fear. Guests stepped aside as the officers guided him toward the driveway. Phones lifted uncertainly, capturing the collapse of a man who minutes earlier had been the center of admiration. Halfway across the lawn, he stopped and looked back at me. "We can work this out," he said quietly. "Please." Once those words would have broken me. Now they sounded distant. "I already did," I replied. The patrol car door closed moments later. The engine started, gravel crunching as it disappeared down the long drive toward the road. Only then did my body finally relax. My mother stepped beside me, placing an arm gently around my shoulders. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. I exhaled slowly. The first full breath I felt I had taken in months. Around us, guests remained stunned, unsure whether to leave or speak. Conversations returned gradually, hushed and uncertain. Adrian's carefully built image had unraveled in less than 10 minutes. Not through anger, through truth. As the afternoon sun lowered across the gardens, casting long shadows over the estate, I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. The trap Adrian designed had closed exactly as he intended. The only difference was whose life had been caught inside it. And standing there among witnesses, surrounded by the life he tried to claim, I understood that the future ahead no longer belonged to fear, but entirely to me and the child who had unknowingly given me the strength to fight back at all. The house felt unfamiliar after Adrian was gone, not empty. Whitmore House had never truly been empty, but quieter in a way that felt deeper than sound. For weeks, I caught myself listening for habits that no longer existed. The front door opening at 6, footsteps crossing the kitchen floor, the low murmur of phone calls taken just outside the patio doors. Each time, there was only stillness. And slowly, that stillness began to feel like peace. News of the arrest spread faster than I expected. Within days, Adrian's firm released a formal statement confirming financial misconduct under investigation. Former clients came forward. Additional charges followed. The life he had constructed through charm and control unraveled publicly, piece by piece. Caroline handled the divorce efficiently. The prenup clause Adrian once planned to use against me worked entirely in reverse. His documented affair and criminal actions eliminated any financial claims he hoped to make. There were no dramatic courtroom confrontations, only signatures, filings, and consequences quietly finalized. I attended one hearing. Adrian looked smaller without confidence to carry him. He avoided my eyes at first, but as proceedings ended, he glanced toward me briefly. Confusion still visible, as if he could not understand how the story had changed. Maybe he never would. Outside the courthouse, my mother slipped her arm through mine. "It's finished," she said gently. But endings rarely happen all at once. 4 months later, early autumn sunlight filled the hospital room as my child was born. The moment the nurse placed my baby in my arms, the world narrowed into something astonishingly simple. Warmth, breath, and a future untouched by the past that nearly destroyed me. Tiny fingers curled instinctively around mine, and everything else faded. People later asked whether I planned to contact the donor, whether biology mattered enough to create that connection. I thought carefully about it, but the answer felt clear. Family wasn't defined by DNA. It was defined by who stayed. My child would grow up surrounded by love, by a grandmother who never stopped showing up, by a home filled with history, by honesty instead of performance. That was enough. Weeks passed quietly. I returned to small routines, morning walks through the gardens, coffee by the kitchen window, lunches with my mother that slowly rebuilt, years lost to silence. We rarely spoke about Adrian anymore. There was nothing left to understand. One morning, rocking my baby near the window, sunlight stretched across the same floors my grandmother once walked decades earlier. I remembered something she used to say when I was young. Strong women don't avoid storms. They learn how to stand through them. For a long time, I believed strength meant never being deceived. Now I understood differently. Strength meant surviving the moment you realized you had been. My phone buzzed softly beside me. A message from my mother appeared. Lunch tomorrow? I smiled. Always, I replied. Outside, the garden shifted toward autumn colors. Gold, amber, quiet change moving forward without asking permission. Adrian Hale had tried to take my future, my reputation, my peace. Instead, he revealed something I might never have discovered otherwise. Resilience isn't loud, and justice doesn't always arrive with anger. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through truth, support, and the chance to begin again. I looked down at my child sleeping peacefully against my chest. The story that nearly destroyed me had ended, but the life that followed felt steadier, stronger, entirely my own. And if there is one thing I learned through all of it, it is this. Freedom doesn't come from winning against someone. It comes from no longer being afraid of who you are without them. And if you stayed through this entire journey, you already understand why some stories aren't just told. They're shared, so no one facing the same silence ever feels alone.